Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. So this morning we'll be doing another sutta study, this time focused on a short discourse from the Anguttara Nikaya. So we'll start by paying homage to the Buddha, and then I'll go through this discourse. And it's quite short, so if you have any questions, I recommend typing them in early so that I make sure to go through whatever statements you have. So we'll start by paying homage to the Buddha, and then I'll go through the discourse and give some explanations, and then I'll take any questions that you might have. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So this morning we'll be looking at the Achinteya Sutta, which is from the Majjhima Nikaya, the Anguttara Nikaya. Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 4, sutta number 77. As mentioned, this is quite a short discourse. So I'll go through this fairly quickly and give some explanation. So please do type in some questions if you want this to go in a bit more detail. So the discourse begins. This is presumably the Buddha speaking. It says, Chattarimani bhikkhave achinteyani nachinte tabbani. So the Buddha says, monks, there are these four things which are unthinkable. So achinteya, this means there's something which one should not think about, or one which are not possible to think about. They're something which it is outside the domain of thought, outside the domain of intellectual examination. It's something which you can't come to a satisfactory conclusion simply through intellectual reasoning. And the Buddha continues, he says, Yani chintento umma dasa vigata sabagi asa. So for one who thinks about and ponders these things, so one who tries to come to an intellectual conclusion about these four things, he says they will just become deranged and disturbed. So ummada means when the mind is literally it has the meaning of distracted or it's actually related to the word pamada, which means negligent or heedless, which itself is related to the word mada, which means intoxication. So the which is related to the word majja, which means intoxicant, as one might be familiar with from the 5 precepts. One of them is sura mereya majja pamadatana veramani, so to refrain from alcohol and intoxicants that cause heedlessness. So this term ummada then is related to these other words, which mean heedlessness, which mean intoxication. So the term ummada, it often gets translated as crazy or deranged. And that's okay, but the meaning of it is more in the sense of that it causes unnecessary distraction. It causes the mind to just become muddled, mixed up, and not particularly useful. So like being in a state of intoxication or distraction. And vigata, which is the second thing he says here, will tend to happen to someone who ponders and speculates on these four things. Vigata means to be disturbed. It means to be troubled or harassed. So it has the sense then of if one ponders and thinks about these four things, if you spend a lot of time trying to come to a satisfactory intellectual conclusion about these four things, then you're just going to be harassing yourself. You're just going to be causing a lot of disturbance and agitation and mental discomfort for oneself. So again, so he's saying there are these four things which one is not capable of arriving at an intellectual conclusion about. One is not capable of grasping them solely through intellectual reasoning, solely through thinking. And if one tries, then it will just make you distracted, disturbed, uncomfortable. That's not going to do you any good. And he says, Katamani Chattari, what for? And the first one he says, Buddhanang Buddha Visaye Achinteyo Nachinte Tabbo. Yang Chintento Umada Sivigata Sabagi Asa. So the first item he gives is Buddhanang Buddha Visayo. So Buddhanang means of the Buddhas, so of the awakened ones. And Buddha Visayo. So the term Visaya means the domain or the territory. Or the Bhante Suddhaso translated this word as scope. So the Visaya means the extent or the reach, the intellectual extent or the mental extent of a Buddha in this case. So the Buddha Visaya. So the scope of a Buddha's mind. So the full extent of a Buddha's understanding, the full extent of how they perceive and relate to the world, the full extent of how they perceive reality, the full extent of their understanding. So this is something which can only be known through experience, through directly experiencing the Buddha mind. In other words, only by attaining full awakening can we actually have a complete, thorough understanding of the Buddha Visaya, the domain of a Buddha's mind, the scope and extent of a Buddha's understanding of reality. So this is not something which we can satisfactorily come to just by sitting down and thinking really hard about it for a while. But it's something which can only be known through direct experience. And this is the thread which runs through all of these, by the way. So the common thread that runs through all of these is in all of these, the Buddha is talking about things which can only be known through direct experience, where it's not sufficient just to have intellectual reasoning in order to really understand it. And actually, this is a running theme throughout much of Buddhism. So much of Buddhism, it's things which need to be experienced. It's things which need to be felt directly if we want to really understand them. So the second one here, similarly, the second one is Jayasa Bhikkhave Jana Visayo Achinteyo Nachinte Tapo Yang Chintanto Umada Sivigata Sabhagyasa. So this one is Jayasa Jana Visayo. So Jayasa means for one who is meditating. So Jayi means either more generally, it means a meditator, someone who's practicing meditation. It can also have the more specific meaning of a person who is practicing jhana. So the noun jayi is directly related to the verb jhana. So the verb jhana means, again, more literally, it means meditating. But it has the specific sense of the four stages of deep concentration that come when one's meditation is particularly focused, concentrated, steady, and unified. So, what exactly is the experience of jhana? What does it actually feel like? What does it actually what is the domain of the mind? What is the scope, extent, and perception of the mind when the mind is fully immersed in a intensely mm, stable, concentrated, alert, steady, unified, joyful state of mind? So that state of mind which we call jhana. Well, again, we can talk about it and we can think about it, but we'll never come to a complete understanding of what it's actually like until we practice meditation sufficiently in order to be able to actually directly experience jhana. Until that point, we can sit around and speculate about what the mind of a meditator in jhana is like, but we'll never really understand it. We'll just be wasting our time, basically, just filling up the mind with a lot of useless mental activity, which ironically will then make it more difficult to enter jhana because the mind, in speculating about what it might feel like to be in jhana, we're actually preventing the mind from unifying and settling, such that the experience of deep concentration would be possible. So the Buddha says this also is something which is not worth speculating about. It's not worth trying to come to an intellectual conclusion about, namely, what the experience of a meditator in jhana is like. So we have some general guidelines, some general pointers in the suttas, which talk a bit about, uh, in general terms, talks a bit about what jhana is like. And the main point of those descriptors is they help us point our mind in the right direction. But they're actually quite limited. These descriptions are not particularly detailed. They're just there to give us some general signposts that help us incline the mind towards deep concentration. But the actual experience of being in jhana is beyond words. It's beyond intellectual reasoning. It's not something that you can simply reach through rational thought. Something which is done through practice, through direct experience. Then the third one that the Buddha gives, he says, Kama vipako achinteyo nachinte tabo yang chintenta umada sivagata sabhagyasa. So kama vipaka, the Buddha says, is also something which is outside the domain of thought. It's not something which one can come to a conclusion about intellectually. It's not something which is worth speculating about. So kamma vipaka, kamma means action and vipaka means result. And this is talking in particular about how we make volitional decisions. So we make intentional decisions in our life. We make actions based upon intention. And that is what we call karma, or kamma in Pali, which then produces a corresponding result, which we call vipaka. And elsewhere in the suttas, the Buddha gives some general overall descriptions of how kamma works in a very general sense. So generally speaking, when we do good things, when we perform actions based upon kindness, based upon compassion, based upon self-restraint, based upon wisdom, then that tends to produce positive results, pleasant results. So if you do something nice for another person, if you do an act of generosity, then that will tend to produce a pleasant result at some point in the future. Possibly in this life, possibly in a future life, possibly both. So this is kama vipaka. It's the process by which our actions produce results, either in this life or in future lives. And in many places in the suttas, the Buddha describes how our experience can be seen as experiencing the results of our past karma and creating the karma which will produce our future experience. And again, he gives some general examples, such as if one is generous, then in future lives one is more likely to be wealthy. If one is kind, then in future lives one is more likely to be beautiful. If one takes care of others, then in future lives one is more likely to be healthy. And of course, the opposite. If we hurt other people, then in future lives we're more likely to have health problems. If we kill others, then in future lives we're more likely to die young, and so on. So he gives some general examples like that. But he also says that it's not worth speculating too much about the effects of karma. So, for example, he gives one example of wasted thought. He says in the Sabasava Sutta, he gives the example of speculating, what was I in the past? How was I in the past? What did I do in the past that led to me having these conditions now? So that kind of speculating about karma doesn't really do us any good, because the truth is we don't know exactly what we did in the past to produce the exact results that we have now. What we do know is we know what we're doing right now, but also we don't know exactly what effects that's going to have in the future. We only have a general sense that our actions will produce corresponding results. So we should try our best to do good actions, wholesome actions, actions based upon wisdom and compassion, because this is what will produce beneficial and pleasant results for us in the future. But speculating endlessly about the specific details of what we did in the past to get our current condition and what specific conditions we're going to get in the future based on our current actions, that's what the Buddha is saying is achinteya, so outside the domain of thought. Not something that is worth thinking about, and not something that can be thought about, in the sense that one cannot reach a satisfactory conclusion simply through speculative thought. It's still good to think about and consider karma and vipaka in the most general sense, as mentioned. So a general understanding of how our decisions have important consequences. But it's speculating about the details and the specifics that is a waste of time. It's not within the domain of intellectual thought. And then finally, the last example the Buddha gives in these four, he says, Loka chinta achinteya na chintetaba yang chintento umma dasivagata sabagi asa. So this last one is Loka chinta. So Loka means the world. And Chinta, again, Chinta means speculation or thought, or again, intellectual rumination. So this then is speculation about the nature of the world. So speculating about the nature of reality. So some examples the Buddha gives elsewhere in the suttas are things like, oh, is the universe finite, or is it infinite? Is it eternal, or is it not eternal? So it's kind of like just speculating or ruminating about things which we just don't know, things which are outside the domain of our direct experience. And so these are things which a Buddha knows. A Buddha knows the nature of reality. A Buddha knows whether the universe is finite or infinite, whether it's eternal or not eternal. It's something which is within the domain of an awakened being's knowledge. But it's something which, for an ordinary unawakened person, if we just speculate about these things, then ultimately we're just wasting our time. So speculating about things which are outside the domain of our direct experience. And it's not something which ultimately brings us any benefit. So what actually does bring us benefit is to consider the Four Noble Truths. So again, coming back to the Sabasava Sutta, the Buddha says that the right way to apply our mind is to consider what is dukkha, paying attention to our experience of dukkha. and understanding, oh, this is dukkha. Uh, Understanding what the cause of our dukkha is. So looking at our mind, looking at our experience, and trying to identify what the cause of our dukkha is. So what desire is present in the mind that's causing dukkha? What aversion is present? What delusion is present in the mind? So digging out the cause of dukkha and then working on eradicating it through practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. Then as we practice in this way, then naturally our understanding of reality will start to expand. But it won't happen simply through speculative thought, but it will happen through the cultivation of the Noble Eightfold Path, through practicing the practices of wisdom and compassion, which eventually culminate in complete awakening. So that's the end of this discourse. So again, a relatively short discourse for this morning. So at this time, we can go ahead and respect the sutta with 3 sadhus, and then I'll see if there's any questions to answer this morning. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And hello to all the people who have checked in online. So hello to Charles Lee, Poonam, Vivian, John, Amy, Yanko, Ming Ming, Jeff, Karuna, P. Lee, Margaret, Bhumika, Pamela, Marielle, Richard, Hai Eng, Edward, Egad, and Manal. Hello to all of you. Good to see all of you joining in. And I see one question so far. So Hai Eng says, can we go mad thinking about rebirth, especially in the lower realms, as extreme fear may arise? So again, it is useful to have a general understanding of karma and rebirth. So understanding that the decisions that we make will influence what kind of rebirth we have. So whether we're reborn in more pleasant states of being, even in the heaven realms as devas, or reborn in less pleasant states of being, including the animal realms, the ghost realms, the hell realms. But there's no need to have fear, because what we need to do is to practice generosity and morality. So practicing kindness and self-restraint, practicing giving and sharing, then we're building up the necessary good karma that we will not be reborn in the lower realms. So rather than speculate fearfully about rebirth in the lower realms, instead we should focus on doing a lot of generosity and kindness, and then reflecting on the fact that we've done a lot of generosity and kindness, which means that we're building up the conditions for rebirth as a human, or in the higher realms as devas. So then we'd have nothing to fear, because we know that we're producing only good karma, and only karma that leads to higher rebirth. Especially if we're committed to the Buddhist path, then we have nothing to fear with the process of rebirth, because we know that we're developing the karma that leads to positive rebirth, and we're also developing the karma which leads in the direction of awakening. So as long as we stay committed to practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, then we have nothing to fear from the process of rebirth, and we have no reason to believe that we're heading to the lower realms. And whatever we've done in the past is, it's the past. We can't do anything to change what we've done in the past. But what we can do is we can focus on cultivating as much good karma in the present moment as we can. And for the rest of our life, to focus on cultivating good karma, and to make the aspiration that in future lives as well, we will continue to practice the Noble Eightfold Path as best we can. Then we have another question here from Jeff. So Jeff says, is the sutta suggesting we leave those issues, or that we find another way to get to knowledge about them? So my understanding is that the Buddha here, he's saying that Again, uh, these are four topics which we have some information about in the suttas, but that they're all things which require direct experience in order to really understand them. So once we have a basic understanding, then it's not necessary to speculate about the details. So what exactly is the extent of a Buddha's knowledge? Well, we don't really need to worry about that so much, do we? So how exactly does a Buddha see the world? Well, we don't actually need to worry about that so much because we'll know when we get there. What exactly does jhana feel like? Well, we'll find out when we get there. So what's more important is, do we understand how to practice such that we'll become awakened? Do we understand how to meditate such that we'll eventually enter jhana? Rather than speculate about what these things feel like, instead we should focus on doing the practices that lead towards a direct experience of them. Then we'll know for ourselves, instead of just having some hypothesis, some intellectual speculation about it. Instead, we'll know for ourselves through direct experience. So I think that's more the point of this, is the Buddha is saying, like, not to just waste our time hypothesizing about these experiences. So the experience of deep meditation, the experience of awakening, the exact workings of karma, the nature of reality. These are things which we will know for ourselves as we develop the advanced stages of Buddhist practice. So the important thing is just to understand how to practice the Eightfold Path and to do so with dedication. And then inevitably, we will eventually have direct knowledge of these four domains. But just to speculate and hypothesize about these four domains, I mean, it's not really that useful. I mean, it's good to have some basic intellectual understanding of them, but we don't need to waste our time trying to hypothesize about the details. And Charles Lee has a question. This is slightly off topic. Says, what do the terms once returner and non-returner mean regarding rebirth in the human realm? A little bit off topic. I think this would be better for monk chat this evening. I'm briefly speaking, a once returner is someone who can be born at most one more time in the human realm. And a non-returner is someone who won't be born again in the human realm. A once returner can be born in any of the Deva realms, however. A non-returner can be born only in the Suddhavasa, the pure realms, the pure abodes. But if you want more detail, you can bring this question to monk chat this evening. And that's the last question. So that might be sufficient for this morning, for this discussion on this short sutta from the Anguttara Nikaya, the Achinteya Sutta. So at this time, we can go ahead and conclude the session with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And so this evening, we'll have our usual Friday evening monk chat. So you're welcome to come and ask all of your questions related to any topic whatsoever. And I'll be here along with 1 or 2 other monks, and we'll answer whatever questions you have. So we'll see you this evening.